Sorry, I was muted there for a second. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Honey Badger Radio. My name is Brian, and this is Brian's Badger Lodge, which is the call-in show where we get to hear from you guys. And you can give us your thoughts on maybe a topic that I might bring up today, or anything else that you're interested in, or maybe you have ideas you want to share and you think we're doing everything wrong. We have the wrong outlook, we have the wrong beliefs, whatever it is. Feel free to call in, and to do that, all you got to do is go into the description. You'll see a link to Discord. Click on that link, and then you'll find yourself in the voice channels screening room. And once in the screening room, you'll see Swashberry, who is my screener, and he'll make sure that your audio is working and your settings are all good. That we can hear you, you can hear us. It sounds pretty good. And then he'll ask you for basically a summarization of whatever your question or subject is. So, and then I'll bring you in and we can talk. So yes, please consider doing the call in. I will also occasionally acknowledge the chat. Hello, chat. I see Ryland Tap English, Latols, and Lat QCD 92. And I hope that more people will join as it goes on. I do see there are a number of people. So I'm going to try and engage a little bit more with the chat, because I do want people to see this as an opportunity to talk to each other, right? So if you're able to and you want to, please consider going and calling into the show. All right. So with that said, that's what the Badger Lodge is supposed to be about. It's a place where we can all get together and exchange ideas and maybe even get into some debates or whatever. But I also usually try to bring something to sort of get people to think about. Maybe I bring in things that are supposed to encourage conversation, discussion, or even debate. So today, I was talking to my wife about this, and we talk about this quite often. I've told her that basically, ever since I started doing Honey Badger Radio, and hello Emile Fernet, hello Ryland Tap Ingalls. Ever since I've been doing these shows, I have been able to, through the fireside chat mostly, meet a lot of interesting people and have them on as guests. And when I started doing this, I didn't really think too much about what those guests believed in, maybe outside of the men's issue subject, which is what we focus on, what we do our best to focus on. But after a long time of me inviting people, approaching people, and just basically trying to get people to come on and talk to us about men's issues, I started to notice a pattern that was kind of hard to avoid. And that pattern was that most of the people who were willing to be guests on the show and were willing to talk to me about the various issues that men face, and it wasn't even I was specifically saying we're going to talk about feminism, because I almost never do that unless the guest has a specific focus on discussing things from feminism. But I generally don't do that. When I approach a guest, I ask them if they're aware of men's issues, or that I notice that they do bring them up, or something like that, right? It started off that I was mostly asking people if they're aware of it, because it did seem like no one was. And it didn't, and whether or not they were feminists didn't really matter. Even though I do believe feminists have a vested interest in not talking about men's issues. But that I digress. I'm getting a little away from the main point. Point is, though, that there were a number of people who didn't know this. Maybe they were blue-pilled guys and gals, or they were purple-pilled at best. But it was because I spoke to them, and people like me spoke to them. People who, wanted to share these ideas, or just people that are putting them out there. I think that it started to get into the public consciousness, right? And I think that the thing that I wanted to touch on is that I've noticed that most of the people who are the most receptive to discussing men's issues tend to be um, conservative or right wing people. And I don't think that I guess what I'm kind of like thinking is that there are plenty of things that conservatives promote that we can disagree with and we can debate over and we could even argue over if it like gets to that point. And I don't have a problem with any of that. Um, but I also have to acknowledge that they are, in fact, reciprocated or becoming more reciprocative of our talking points. And I see that it's actually affecting large swaths of the, I guess, conservative population. Frankly, I don't like the label conservative. I think it's ill-fitting, but I'm gonna use it because I know that most of you guys know what I mean when I say that, right? So the it was common, like probably in 2014, where I would find that in many ways the conservatives were no better than the left was about how they treated men. The only difference is that the left thinks that men should do it thanklessly and endlessly, and the conservatives at least wanted to like honor men for doing it. But they also still demanded they do it, right? They still said, well, you have to, as a man, you have to do your job, right? Well, and that was coming from pretty much every mainstream, sort of like conservative commentary, political pundit type. Like, I'm sure that if I could go look for it right now, I'd find like a Ben Shapiro video where he would tell men that, they need to, man up and um, stop being deadbeats and raise their kids, when they obviously don't know that it's not simply deadbeat dads. That's actually probably the minority of the problem. But they were buying into this notion that if you just keep pressing men and then you keep pressing men to do what you think they should be doing, that it'll make everything right. But by doing that, they have to ignore what women do. They have to ignore the ways that women make this situation worse, and they almost have to like find ways to victimize them to explain it, which is what they did, back at that time. I remember, and these were some conservatives that I'm subscribed to, or I've at least seen some videos of, but like your Ben Shapiro's, your Larry Elders, your Dennis Prager, your even Steven Crowder would do that too, right? And he's a little bit more like, I think, libertarianish, but still. And libertarians, by the way, libertarians almost they don't have an answer to that question. Like, when some of them get it, but a lot of them avoid it. So when I bring up like the issue of family to libertarians, they're just like, well, if it does it have anything to do with the government, well, then I don't care. And I'm like, yeah, but if your society is sick and unhealthy because kids are growing up without fathers and they have a low impulse control and they commit a lot of crimes, I mean, you can't, like, yeah, libertarianism on its own doesn't have an answer to that. So you're gonna have to like start working with people who maybe they have a bit of a they're basing their choices on a moral prescription that libertarians don't want to like actually confront. And I say this as someone who's probably more libertarian than anything, because I want to live in a world where people are free first, and then everything else is like, it can be suggested, it can be encouraged, but it can't be forced. And I don't think, but anyway, I digress. Sorry. I just wanted to bring that up because libertarians are kind of, that's why they're a joke right now, because they don't live in reality. And this is something we need. We have to live in reality. We can't create the libertarian utopia if everyone is so out of control because the culture is so sick. So it's just not within reach. So I noticed that with conservatives going back to the early 2010s to mid 2010s, but recently, I've been seeing a lot more conservative commentators that have not only stopped doing that, where they've actually offered a lot more sympathy and compassion for male issues and male problems, because they're not just, obviously if it affects men, it also affects society eventually. And I think that there, it might be late, you could say, or whatever, but I think that a lot more conservative commentators are actually starting to see what we've been talking about. And I think it's very encouraging. And one of the best examples, just off the top of my head, is the last, I want to say it was like this week that just passed. The last couple of shows that Steven Crowder did, he had one where he was talking about an interview that we talked about with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and she did a cover story for GQ, and it was obviously like a feminist article that was aimed at men, hence it was put into GQ magazine, essentially telling men that what they have to do to serve women and be on the right side of history. And they were using AOC and this kind of like toxic masculinity narrative to sell this, okay? And this is the reason for this, I believe, is because men are the ultimate resource. But we don't have to treat them like a resource, but they are the ultimate resource. So if you can get them on your side in a political battle, then you win, because the men are basically everything. This is the reason why AOC and people like her got the women on board, because another way that they know they can get men is through the women. So they get the women, and then the women are like, oh, we need to be more like this, and I want to see more of this, and I want more of this, right? And then the men are like, because they want to give the women what they want, they try to do it. But and obviously there's like a political end to this, but what I dug is that Steven Crowder talked about, the true history of feminism. But more than that, he talked about all of the men's issues, all of the ways that men have it rough. He brought up Nora Vincent, which is a very important story. She recently got assisted suicide. I guess she never recovered from living her life as a man. And in interviews, she said flat out, men have it worse. Men have it harder, full stop, right? This is just the reality. And the fact is that most men know this is true, and they just kind of go, well, somebody's got to do it, so I'm going to do it, right? They just endure. And I think maybe it's because we're better suited to endure, and maybe that's because it was forced on men. We're evolved to endure because no one else was being asked to do it. And so he went to bat for men, and he did it again. He did it for, I think it was Olivia Wilde was doing, and also not just Olivia Wilde, but maybe to a lesser extent, there was that story of Jennifer Lawrence. And Jennifer Lawrence was talking about how, like she has nightmares about Tucker Carlson or something. And obviously she's just saying like what her, Hollywood friends want her to say. Because like if you look at really old interviews with Jennifer Lawrence, she called herself a little R Republican, and that like her father, was a big part of her life and everything. But now she's sort of throwing all that out because there's like a line you have to toe, and she wants to keep getting work. So I think she's just towing the line. She might actually be a true believer too. But the point is, it exists in opposition to men, right? She had to essentially, in a way, disown her father. And so that when you take into account the Jennifer Lawrence thing, but especially the Olivia Wilde thing, where she said that the villain from her new film, who's being played by Chris Pine, is actually based on Jordan Peterson. And if you look at the trailer for that movie, which I did, I think I've seen it like twice, there is absolutely no connection. Like unless, of course, Olivia Wilde believes that Jordan Peterson is some kind of 1950s suburban white America cult leader, which is essentially what her villain is. By the way, very creative. I've never heard of like a villain in a story that's a 1950s husband that controls his wife. I've never heard of that before. That never happens. Very original. Thank you. But like, this is sort of predictable, typical stuff, right? Because the idea is there's a narrative, a story that's being told to us over and over and over and over and over about how evil men are. And it has to be repeated through narrative because there's no evidence of it. There's no historical proof. There's just like presumptions. The presumption being that because women wanted to live in luxury, and it's always after like 1950s, because that was the period when we were probably like doing the best in terms of like growth, because it's after World War One and World War, I'm sorry, it's after World War Two. And the thing that's funny about that is that a majority of the people, the couples, the men specifically, the husbands of that time, might have been vets, but apparently that doesn't matter, because they were patriarchs and they want to sell this thing. They're not going to do this, they pick a time period that was probably like the quietest and maybe even the most where there was the most growth, and then they make that the worst period in history. And of course it's because we all have a kind of like a fond, we think of it fondly, even if we weren't alive, at the time, because there was no war going on. It was like a time of peace. So, but I mean, there was the Korean War, I guess, but nobody really talks about that. But so this is what I'm sorry, I went off track again. So I gotta say that I was really thrilled with the fact that people like Steven Crowder, not only him, Jordan Peterson's always been, I think, pretty good. I mean, he may not say everything we want him to, but that's okay. We can't expect that. More important than that is not that they're saying everything that we are saying or that they package it the same way. I don't think that's important. I think it's sort of like it's a purity test in a way. Like I'm like, well, look, if you bring attention to the issues, right? And that's what they're doing. Like Crowder has a massive audience. Like more people watch him than watch any mainstream news outlet. So let's first of all acknowledge the scope of this conversation, how much it's grown. Secondly, he credits Karen like multiple times. He brings up Karen Strawn and he, explains like who she is, what she does, how good she is at dismantling all this stuff. So this means that Karen Strawn is his primary resource. Okay? And I believe that regardless of where it comes from, it's out there. It's out there. And I think that's what's really going on. Now, I want you to, because look, here's the thing. I think that big tech, activists, academics, intellectuals, politicians, corporations that are woke, they're going to do whatever they can to suppress all of these narratives, especially the narratives about men and women, because they want to maintain their version of reality, which is the feminist version, because it's the only way they can continue to acquire power and resources. So they're going to do that, right? So this, I think, and of course, convincing men that it's their fault and their path to redemption or their path to eliminating original sin is to basically do as they ask. It's just about power. It's about control over the culture, and it ultimately is about control over men. And the only way that we can fight back is to tell the truth about men. And we have to tell the truth about men. We have to tell, women, feminists, whatever, about the ways that men are affected that are unique because they are men, and the ways that women are affected by things that are not unique because men also experience them, in order to break up that those stigmatized presumptions that we make about men and women suffering. and there is things that conservatives need to work on with regards to that. But I think we can deal with that later because I do think the more important issue is that they're talking about men's issues and they're aware of them. So, Peterson has brought it up a number of times. Crowder has brought it up. Larry Elder has brought it up now. He's talked about this. Sheriff David Clark, who I've had on the show before, Jesse Lee Peterson, the Reverend, he is always talking about men. In fact, he has been saying for 30 years that the problem is men. Not that they are the problem, but that there are problems with men that we have to address. Now, of course, his solutions are based in his Christian faith. That's fine. You may not agree with that, but he is identifying the problem regardless. And I think that says a lot. And he's been doing this for a very long time. It would have been really easy for him to be like, this is the fault of white supremacy. This is the fault of, women's suffrage. He doesn't do that at all. He's very much against doing that. And he knows that it's a male problem because of motherhood. That's I think his kind of what it boils down to for him. And there might be something to that. I mean, I think that's a worthwhile thing to look into. So when I guess what I'm ultimately saying is, I think that that the tide is shifting and that more people that are not MRAs, which it doesn't matter to me. I don't care who says it. I just care that it's out there being said. More people who are not MRAs or are MRA adjacent or something are saying these things. And this to me is huge. It's enormous. I didn't think that in such a short amount of time I would hear a conservative commentator talk about the dangers of single motherhood or the ways that why men are the majority of the homeless, why men are the majority of people on that have depression, why men are the majority of suicides, right? And I think that they are doing that. See, X-Man, he says, neither the left or the right ultimately care about talking about men's issues. The left has to pander to feminists while the right has to appeal to tradition. This is what I'm talking about. Can their minds not be changed? Can nobody's minds be changed? Do we just have to create two camps that both hate men, no matter what they say, no matter what they propose or offer? And then we just say, no, we're the only ones that actually care. Only us. And we also happen to be an extremely small minority. Or is it possible that one group of people, they may have gone about things incorrectly, but they appear to be acknowledging and recognizing the fact that that's not working. That they, just saying well, we need to get back to tradition doesn't work. And the reason why it doesn't work, and this is one of the things that they're also realizing, has nothing to do with men. It's because of women. It's because women are rejecting these things and they're becoming, boss, lady bosses, or they're opening OnlyFans accounts or whatever, right? They're just getting pregnant and using the system. And I think they're realizing this, that women are doing this and they're doing it on purpose because they benefit from it. And that in many cases, if not most, men just want a family and a wife. And that's what they want. Now, you could call that tradition if you want. I don't know if that is really important, but I think that's what most men want. I mean, it doesn't matter if it's traditional or not. It's what men want because we are a pair bonded species. It shouldn't be seen as a political choice to want to partner up with a woman, marry her, and start a family with her. I don't get why that has to be something partisan. But this is how it's been framed. You're either pro that or you're, I guess, anti that. yeah, reproduction is not traditional. But like, this is the thing that is, it's, if a right wing person or a conservative person says something with sympathy for men and brings up men's issues, and I mean, even circumcision, it doesn't always come up because that's one of the sticking points. I get that. Okay? But we can deal with that. We can deal with that because I'm certain that there are probably like some, in the conservative sphere, maybe even more than you think, that would like to hear what the case against circumcision is. And I don't even think that is like as major an issue as it used to be. But I don't know for sure. But I don't think that it's like a deal breaker. I think that we can deal with that, eventually, or in the short term or long term or whatever, right? But I know that people get really upset. Like, it's like, and I'm like, well, look, we can work that out. But the fact is that outside of something like that, if they say, again, they are acknowledging the suicide rates, they are acknowledging the child custody, they are acknowledging the false allegations, they are acknowledging like the divorce courts, the child support problems, like all of this, is being acknowledged. And it's being acknowledged by conservatives. So can we give them credit for that? Because the fact is that MRAs are a pretty small percentage of the population. And I think that we can totally support anyone, but I mean, it's probably going to be conservatives because they're more likely to do it, who supports like men's issues being resolved, or at least us working towards it. Like, they would support if I said we need a men's shelter for battered men. They would support it. They would say, yes, of course, this happens to men too. And they probably wouldn't be the ones giving us resistance if we tried to open one. And I think that we'd probably get more support now than back when Earl Silverman was trying to do it. Because I do think there's a lot more sympathy towards male issues. This is what I'm getting at. Like, does it matter where it comes from? Because, like, I mean, it kind of does, because you have to, like, look at, let me just make sure. Something happened with my browser for some reason. Let me just make sure I'm still live. Okay, I am. Yeah, I just had my browser crash. I might have a problem a little bit later. Hopefully not, though. Okay. So anyway, that was odd. Let me close some windows. I don't want to, like, create any opportunities for this to happen again. I don't know why this happens, but all right. So let's look at some comments, because I kind of forgot where I left off. But I think that it's heartening. But like I said, for people who like are more cynical about this, or maybe even like outright hostile, what should the MRM look like? How much reach should we have, and how do we get it? Because like, if you appeal to anyone with your ideas, with these troubles, they're either going to be like more so on the left, or they're going to be more so on the right. Like, and I know it doesn't matter who acknowledges it, as long as like we can discuss the potential solutions, because I worry about the left solutions to everything. But if right now the support we're getting, and the awareness raising and the conversation is more so taking place on the right, then like, why is that a problem? Assuming they're not trying to distort the narrative, which I haven't seen myself. I mean, they may have their own angle. And the thing is too, like, for example, a lot of conservatives are Christians, right? And so people become really suspicious of them, because they might, you're going to try and stick God in this or something like that. But there's plenty of MRAs that are Christians too. And so maybe they just believe in like what the core principle is. And it's not like, here's where I bring in God or Jesus. Because like I again, like, Jesse Lee Peterson is highly religious, but he does know that there are male issues, and he is raising awareness about them. Even if his solution is for you to, like, be born again, I mean, so, like, he can feel that way if he wants. He doesn't write the laws. He's not the one that's, like, ruining men's lives in the courts. He's not doing that. So why do we care about how, what he prescribes when we know that he's acknowledging the issue? So, like, this is, like, I think that this is the important starting point, because the only way we're going to get more people to see these issues is we have to share with them, and that means that their own political beliefs or spiritual beliefs or philosophical beliefs are going to be affected by that. So, all right, so let me see what else you guys are saying. Let me see. The LAC QCD, I don't know what you guys are talking about. Peterson has some public value, mostly as a self-help teacher. As a commenter on current issues, I find him surprisingly lacking in insights. Well, I mean, it might be a lot to ask, but the funny thing is that Peterson never claimed to be, like, the best qualified person. He literally just says common sense shit that's really normal. But you see, that doesn't speak to flaws that Peterson has. That speaks to how god awful our culture, our society is at communicating ideas, because he's one of very few people that are saying what they mean, and they just stand by it. And like, our social media sphere, our media sphere, it's all so, like, controlled and politically correct that, like, anyone who's following those rules of, political correctness, for example, they can't say anything of any real substance because those controls exist. And so since Peterson doesn't, like, march lockstep with that, he comes across as sounding like a major rebel, even though what he's saying is common sense. So I don't blame him. I mean, like, he's only a big figure because he doesn't care what the, social constructivists think. But that doesn't make it any less important, because not a lot of people are saying what needs to be said. And so he does. And this is, like, a masculine thing, by the way. It doesn't necessarily have to be, like, it doesn't necessarily have to be profound. Unless, of course, just saying what you really think is true is profound, which it is for a lot of people, because so many people are cowards and they don't want to say it. So instead, they just stay quiet. Why do you think the Twitterverse and the big tech people and the left online and all of that, why do they hate him so much? They hate him because he tells what he thinks is the truth. And they're like, you can't do that. You have to lie. You have to be a part of us. You have to do what we're doing. And so they hate him for it. But that's what men do. That's why they hate, like, I asked my wife the other day, I said, who do you think the left hates the most right now? Is it Jordan Peterson, Ron DeSantis, Donald Trump, or Andrew Tate? Because, like, they hate those people. And the fact is, they don't have that much in common. Maybe DeSantis and Trump do, maybe. But, like, if you think about it, they don't appear to have much in common on the surface. But they hate them because the one thing that they all do is say what they think. And they're men while they're doing it. And maybe the fact that they're white adds another layer, although I don't think it's as important. So, like, if you want to be in that club, then you just gotta say what they say, or not even, you don't have to agree with it. You just have to, like, put it out there. I actually think that this is, like, the one thing that a lot of people miss. So when I say, well, Andrew Tate got banned from all social media, and then, like, some people, even MRAs, will be like, oh, well, that's because, he actually is a misogynist. And I'm like, is he though? Like, can you show me some evidence? And then they tell me about the time that he, like, whipped the girl with a belt. And then I respond and I say, yeah, but, like, when the woman was interviewed afterwards, she said that it was consensual. And I was like, yeah, so I guess it was just some kinky shit they were doing. So does that make him a misogynist? And you know, of course they just didn't like the way that he spoke, but I was like, but you see, this is why it needs to be defended. Because if you allow an Andrew Tate to be labeled a misogynist, you're giving the feminists ground. You're telling them there is a line that men can cross, that we, you know, that exists, and it's in the realm of language and words. It's not in the realm of anything physical. Like if he actually, you know, assaulted someone, that's a completely different story. But there's been no evidence of that. None. So then, okay, this is about words. So like if you give up that ground, if you say, well, there is a line that can be crossed, and then we're talking about misogyny, well, you've just given the feminists everything, because that's what they rely on. And of course, they know that they can broaden the definition of assault, of rape, of misogyny, of hate, to match whatever it is they need to destroy people and ruin their lives. And so if you go along with that, even on the smallest level, you lose. You just lose, because they're going to use it against you. And so I think, again, unless there's some, like, let's say that there was some evidence that comes out later that proves, you know, something criminal about Andrew Tate, for example. Well, then I would say, okay, well, there should be an investigation. But not, and then like if it turns out he's guilty, then you know the penalty should be the penalty. It doesn't. There's no guilt by association. There is none of that. That's their shit. That's their tactic, right? Oh, you defended a criminal. No, because I defended his ability to speak, but that doesn't mean I defended all of his actions. And that's an important distinction. And we have to stop worrying about the PR thing. We have to stop worrying about what it makes us look like to defend people that deserve due process, you know? And we need to just defend due process. It's basically a principle, period. So, but I have, like I said, when it comes to evidence, I haven't seen any. So to me, I'm just gonna, you know, defend what's right. And I don't really care. So, X-Man says, the history is written by winners. Fathers' rights groups have the most appeal out of all men's groups because of their legal challenges. Yeah, well, they do, but like they don't really get talked about a lot. And I think sometimes, I wouldn't like ask that fathers' rights groups become belligerent, but I mean, I think it takes all types, is what I would say. You know, like some people who are quietly fighting the fight in the courtrooms, through legislation, through voting, through, you know, those things. But like if the normies don't know about it, then you're not going to see your support for your cause grow. And so like I think that something like, for example, the Johnny Depp case, it really put a spotlight on this issue. And all of a sudden, tons of people, you know, tons of people were like, realizing that men could also be victims of domestic abuse, that men can be victims of false allegations, that women can lie, that women can manipulate, and it can destroy their lives. And that was, in my opinion, has a much bigger and more important impact on the culture, which I think is what we need, than you know, like some battle that was fought over one man's child custody case, which I think those are all important. I'm not trying to be dismissive of any of that, because I couldn't imagine what it would be like to be a father and just lose access to their kids and have nobody help me. But so those things matter. But I also think that people should know that these things are happening, and you need people to be vocal. So X-Man says the MRM got a lot of mainstream attention when they challenged Title IX and selective service. And when they also started the annual ICMI, legal challenges seem to be the path to victory, in my opinion. I mean, I think we can do both. I think that media exposure and like online exposure to these issues is just as important, actually. You can fight the legal battles, but like if you don't have like the support of, you know, a decent amount of people that want to see them changed, I mean, I don't know. I think that people should know about these things. I think that we can do both. That's all I'm saying. And that's like the thing, like groups like ours, we're all about talking about the stuff so people know that it's happening and they got a good grasp of like, what the scope is and also what the myths are. Because there's the feminists control the narrative around men and women's relationship to each other for all of history. Like they control the narrative and it's mostly lies. And the reason why they control the narrative is because they know that if they can get everyone to believe what they have told them about history, about men and women's relationships all the way back, okay, then it will affect the general mood or the general hostility between men and women. And if they have that in place, then like they don't have to worry about anything else, because if then all they have to do is they have to say, well, men are winning too many custody battles, so we got to do something about that because they're oppressors. And a bunch of men and women, because they're gynocentric, will come out of the woodwork and they'll say, yeah, that's true, because I watched like 20 movies last year and the father was an abusive, rapey prick in all of them. So I know that this is what men are like, and I'm going to vote for this guy who's promising to, eliminate that. And so it affects the culture, and people will make legal and political decisions based on that. So Jeffrey JFFRYH says Tate self-identified as a misogynist, didn't he? I don't know, but like if he did, that doesn't make him a misogynist. Again, I don't think that misogyny exists at all. I think that, like, how could a guy who basically measures most of his worth as a man on how successful he is with women hate women? Because that's what Tate is. He's the guy who basically tells you, how often he gets laid. Does that guy hate women? Like, I'm sorry, but I don't buy it. I don't care if people confess to it. Like, incels, they do the same thing sometimes. They'll be like, well, I hate women. And I'm like, no, you don't, because you obsess over them. Like, it's okay. It's okay. Even like the most hardcore MGTOW, not all of them, but like, guys that have been like leaders within the MGTOW community that have made videos for years, they still pine for women and it's okay. It's in our nature. There's nothing wrong with that. If you can like resist and, stay away from them, that, then more power to you. I don't care. That's not hatred anyways. Like, like if you avoiding them is not necessarily hating them. So I'm sorry. It's kind of silly. So yeah, I mean, even if he told the world he was a misogynist, I would not believe him. I would tell him to his face, why are you lying? Because I think that, first of all, there are no misogynists. And in every case where people can find a misogynist, they also always turn out to be a misanthrope in the long run. So like Elliot Rodger, who killed more men than women, he obviously just hated people. So, if he hated anyone, he maybe just probably hated himself and decided to take it out on everybody. That's actually the most likely answer. But yeah, I don't buy it. Okay. So let me Ashley Messenger. I'm gonna take some calls now. So but anyway, what I'm saying is that have you guys seen any like non-MRA content creators? They don't have to be conservative, who are actually like supporting men's issues. And it's not one of these Joe Rogan things where they like, they say something supportive and then they like take it back and then they make a joke about MRAs and, not that. That's empty and shallow, but I'm talking about someone who's actually said, well, here are some facts. And I'm seeing more and more and more people that are bringing this up. In fact, I don't follow her, but there was this one girl, I think her channel's called Just Peachy Things. I could be wrong about that. and she was like basically doing a reaction video to the Red Pill, and her friend were watching it, the movie that is, and like they were all like, wow, kind of blown away by this, right? And it was actually the segment that had like the honey badgers in it, which is a short little bit. And I was like, I mean, those girls weren't exactly the brightest bulbs, but I'm really glad that they watched that and that they talked about that and then they recorded it and then put it up on YouTube. Because again, this stuff, like talking about men's issues, would have been so much harder to do in like 2013. And there has been a lot of work done, a lot of work spreading the message, a lot of growth. And yeah, some of it is like a little bumpy, like the way that the manosphere has changed. But I don't think that it's completely worthless. And I do think that it's changing things. It's changing the conversation. Yeah, just pearly things. Thank you. That's what it was. And I think that it is making change, and I think that it's really upsetting some feminists. Not like, your normie bedroom feminist on YouTube or whatever. I don't know. I don't even know if those girls still exist, but like, I'm talking about like, powerful media figures and academics, people like Taylor Lorenz, and I hope that the conversation continues. I don't care who's involved. I just want people to talk about it and do so honestly. So, all right. So now I'm gonna take some of your calls, and we'll do that for a while. Thank you for your patience. Let me know what you guys think about this in the comments. Let me go back to this here. Okay. So Swashberry, who's one of our screeners, says at Ashley Messenger thinks that conservatives aren't ready to talk about men's issues because they're too fixated on the trans issue at Doge. All right, so I'm gonna bring her in, or him. I'm not sure if it's a man or a woman. I think that I don't think that's really gonna be an obstacle, but I'll just bring him in anyways. So I think the trans issue and men's issues are different things in a way, but all right, I'm going to bring them in if they're still able. All right, here we go. All right. Hello, Ashley Messenger.
Hi. Yeah.
Hi. Hey, how's it going? So what's your...
Hi.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say it's good to be here. How can you tell that that's that's like my full name online? I just have like underscore MSGR in the thing.
Yeah, I mean, MSGR looks like it reads Messenger. Is that right? To me, like, when I look at those letters, I don't know what else it could
Well,
mean.
yes, it is. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Ah.
I hadn't considered that though, because I'm autistic. But yeah, I was just gonna ask you about like, I didn't come on to destroy you with my facts and logic or anything. I was just curious about your position on this. So why do you think conservatives are gonna start talking about men's issues? Because I know that was in like the blurb. Because my feeling is that they're just really preoccupied with the
trans issue.
Well, basically the trans thing, and they don't seem to be. And also, if you just listen to their framing of some issues, and this is a point I'm stealing graciously from Janice Fiamengo, where she talked about like you listen to the Daily Wire types talk about abortion, you would think their moral problem with it was that well, in fact, they'll say the problem with abortion is that it's men forcing it on women, which is just absolutely hilarious and like does not track reality in the slightest. And yeah, and Matt Walsh, are those like the guys you were talking about? Because I noticed it said independent conservative media, so I don't know if that's who you... Yeah.
Well, I mean, like, I think that there is... I think the conservative media is a bit broad. So maybe I didn't get to say this in my initial chat about this, but there are like members of conservative media who I don't think are going to acknowledge or discuss men's issues seriously outside of maybe like to the degree that they think that they can motivate those men to fight for their causes without actually acknowledging or addressing their issues. And I think that some examples of that are people from the, like the Daily Wire guys, like Ben Shapiro is like a really big one. He's really resistant to circumcision, but it doesn't stop there, or to like ending circumcision. It doesn't stop there though. He's one of those um man up types. I think that too. I haven't watched him in a while, but I think that Dennis Prager is like that as well. And those are not the guys I'm talking about. I'm like, and what is it? Is Matt Walsh part of the same? I mean, yeah, he does it too, but like I think that he's basically just picked the trans issue as like his number one like focus right now because of his movie and because of the whole like grooming in schools and stuff. And I think that that is like an important discussion, but it's not really a men's issue in my opinion. I think that the funny thing is, I believe that the trans, like the explosion of trans identity, that I think it's gone up like 6,000% or something in like the last decade. I think that the explosion of trans identity is actually probably a byproduct of the outcomes of the nuclear family, of the family unit itself, right? Like, so if you look at the backgrounds of people who identify as trans, so they don't necessarily have gender dysmorphia, they may just be like trenders or whatever, and some of them may actually have gender dysmorphia. But if you look at those people and then you look at their histories, you will find that the overwhelming majority, like over 90 something percent of them, have, number one, they don't have a father, and number two, they were sexually abused when they were very young. And I think the sexual abuse is something that they're more vulnerable to because they don't have a father. And this is like the thing that no one is discussing. Okay? And so like, because no one's discussing it, we're basically just wrestling with this thing that we've been told to accept that actually has a root cause that we could at least discuss, or try to figure out if we can correct that. But the funny thing is that if more men were raising their own children in their homes, then those numbers would go down anyway. And that's what I think. I'm pretty sure. And there would also be fewer men in prison. Like a bunch of other stuff would probably get resolved as well. But we have to play this game now. So to get back to what you're saying, those are not like generally the conservatives I'm talking about. I guess I'm looking at like guys like, I mentioned Steven Crowder, Larry Elder, who's, he's a big, he talks a lot about the black population in the United States, and his whole thing has been for a while about fatherhood and about the need for fathers in the home. But before, he used to talk about it like, stop being a deadbeat dad, take care of your kids. And I get that message to a degree, but it's not something that all black men can just undo, because the system is what's actually essentially incentivizing black women to do this. So he has come to that realization. He has come to the realization that women are marrying the government, and that is the reason for all of these problems. And so the fact that he pinpoints that, I think that that's massive, because that's what people should be discussing. So so like those are, I guess like those are a couple of examples. There's more. I think Peterson to a degree is like that too. I think he acknowledges that men are desperate and they're suffering and they're in pain. I think sometimes he doesn't want to be too, like, I don't know, maybe maternal to them. And so he basically tells them to, like, dust themselves off and and keep moving forward. And I think that men want that. They want to be told that. They want to be encouraged to do that, because I don't know that men respond as much to like empathetic female sympathy, and rather they want to know like, okay, just tell me what I need to do because I want to make this right. And that's the it's kind of tricky, because you want to show them that you care about them and you want them to be happy and do well, but that you don't want to treat them like children, because men don't respond well to that in general. So
Right, but the flip side is that they do need incentives. Like they at least
yes,
need a reason to
yeah, no,
participate in society.
I agree, and I
Yeah.
think that's the thing that we have to like, you know, that's a thing that we have to address. And again, this kind of thing happens in the culture. It also happens in our day-to-day interactions. So, and one of the ways you can do it is to simply encourage men to work with other men in a way that is positive and cooperative, which is what we're built for, really. So that, because I don't know, like what gets a man going. Now, is it just a woman? Because this is like where we're at now, where all of a man's worth is tied up in whether he makes a woman happy. And so this
Yeah.
is how you get simps and white knights, because there's no other way for men to get a sense of their value as men outside of women's approval. And it's basically because we have given women a tremendous amount of social power over the approval of men. And men pursue that. But do they need it from women? I mean, I don't think they do. I think that,
I don't either.
I mean, like, if you think about it, like, throughout most of history, there have always been incels, right? There have always been men who were basically like, they didn't find a woman. Maybe they were a small percentage or whatever, but there was always some men that get left out. I think it's something like, what do they call it? The reproductive bottleneck. And there's like only a small number of men, they continue their lineages, and then a chunk of men don't. So what do we do with those men? Like, what happens to those men? Well, they need different incentives, right? They need like the promise of maybe they'll be remembered, or they will have friends, or they will have served their community or their country or whatever, and that those men will feel as though they still have purpose even if they don't have a family. I mean, it's not ideal. We would like to see all men that want a family to get one, but sometimes that's the way it goes. So, and if we don't do that, and those men are just sitting around twiddling their thumbs, that's when they become bitter. That's when they become, like how they could potentially become either depressed or drug addicted, or other forms of addiction, and ultimately self-destructive, suicidal, or worse, right? So
I mean, I guess I've had that thought too, and I thought that like in traditional societies you could be I don't know, like a monk or something, and that, like a celibate monks, and that's something that was respected.
yeah,
But we don't have an answer to that. We don't have anything that functions like that. So you just get these guys endlessly kind of chasing tail, and when they can't do it, if they don't make the cut or if they don't feel like they can, for whatever reason, they just kind of rot.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And that's also a good point. But essentially, like, I think that men would be perfectly satisfied without a woman if they feel like their service, whatever it might be, really matters. Like they're doing something, that they can take some pride in. And so, again, not encouraging anything either way, but I think it's just an acknowledgement. Uh, in my opinion, yeah, I think that's right. So back to the trans thing, because that's kind of what your question is. I think that ultimately, there are some conservatives, probably a lot of them, that they have like a certain mission that they take, right? It's like it's kind of like it follows the trends. So, right now, because the LGBTQ G Mafia lobby is like pushing itself so hard on everybody, a bunch of people are latching onto that. And of course, there are gynocentric anti-male arguments that get invoked, which I strongly disagree with. Um, because, they're basically using like the whole like threat narrative of a male rapist
Yeah,
going into a woman's
have you
bathroom.
noticed?
Hmm?
I was gonna say, have you noticed that now we're supposed to care about prison violence?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, for
Like
sure.
this
And I
is
mean,
never
like,
this has never been a significant talking point in my lifetime. Everybody makes jokes
yeah.
about the mortgage fraud guy getting raped or whatever, and no
Mm-hmm.
one even cared. But now everybody's obsessing over this and
Yeah.
and talking about female prison as if it's this idyllic place. Like I saw a video on Matt Walsh's channel where he reviews clips, and there was this like fat scientist woman is like one of these people that like you could tell her political views at 20 paces just by glancing at her for like a
Yeah.
split second. And like she what was it? Yeah, she was talking about how um bringing men into women's prisons is going to cause horrible violence, like horrific violence. And women just aren't like that, by which presumably she meant like female prisoners. And it just got me thinking like um how are these people like experts on the conditions of female prisons? Like do you know who Jessica Kent is?
No.
Okay, she's like a female ex-inmate. She was in female prison for a long time. She does YouTube videos where she discusses those issues and like her past experiences. And like you could just listen to, some of their stories. And even she's talked about like she said that she's met loads of female chomos, like women in prison with that charge,
Mm.
who had child sexual
Oh,
abuse cases.
of course, yeah.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, I mean, it even kind of blew my mind to think that, like, wow, even now, with how biased that we know the system is, that there are women who've been through the system saying that, like, oh yeah, there's tons of female child molesters on the inside already. Like, it makes me wonder how many cases like that we've looked over
Mm-hmm.
because of the bias in arrest rates and
Mm-hmm.
whatever else.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I know that's kind of a tangent, but like,
No,
it was
that's
really revelatory.
it's worth bringing up, and I'm glad you did because I wouldn't be. The thing is that I wouldn't be surprised if I learned that there were more female chomos, child molesters, than male ones, because
Yeah.
I think that, well, first of all, it does seem that they're more likely to get away with it. So, there's that, and then also they, when women abuse, they generally do it to people who are less able to defend themselves. um and that usually means they do it to the weak, or they do it to people who can't defend. That's why they always drug men, but before they like cut off their dicks or whatever. So
Yeah. Many
yeah.
of them many of them also appear to be like retarded. Like not to excuse their behavior at all, but like I mean,
Yeah. Oh,
there's a
sure.
concept there's a concept in social science called assortative mating. Basically just the idea is that like attracts like, similar attract similar.
Mm-hmm.
And when you hear these cases of women who female teachers who were sexually abusing, I don't know, 14-year-old boys or something, and they think it's a relationship, you get the impression sometimes that they're just like so dumb that they're better, or that they feel like they can more easily relate to teenage boys than they
Mm-hmm.
can to adult men, and that's like part of their motivation. It's really weird.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
I believe that because I mean, like, anyone who um abuses children sexually, they probably have something wrong upstairs. Like, And that's
Yeah.
just based on no. I'm not just saying that because it's obviously like gross and abnormal. I mean, I've seen like interviews with them, and I'm like, something's not right with this person, and or they talk like children,
Yeah.
they act like children, like they're like they never. There's like a I don't know, um a failure to mature mentally. So I do wonder about that. But okay, anyway, did that? I think we should move on to the next caller. But
Sure.
does that work for you? What I was saying about?
Yeah, yeah, that was
Okay,
great.
all right. Thank you, Ashley. I'm gonna move you back into the screening room. Have a good one. Let me take a look and see if I got any super chats. No. Okay. So Swashberry then says the big Bing boy would like to discuss the tendency among traditional conservatives to claim that they appreciate men when in reality they only value men because of their utility in maintaining a status quo. All right, I will bring Big Bing boy into the chat. Hello, Big Bing boy. Welcome to the show. Can you hear
Uh,
me?
yeah, loud and clear.
All right. All right. Go ahead and uh, give us your take.
Oh, well, I would just like to discuss the tendency among traditional conservatives to claim that they appreciate men. In reality, they only really value men because of their utility, maintaining a status quo.
Uh huh. And
Like,
oh, go ahead.
like I live in kind of like rural, like Ireland, like kind of back west in Connemara. And I'd
Mm-hmm.
be kind of like into the Galway city. I'd kind of see the differences between like the traditional right and the kind of like the new left, the progressives. Because I also work in a lot of cultural spaces like the arts and stuff.
Mm. Oh, okay.
Yeah, and they're very similar. They like view men as a utility. Like they
Yeah.
want to court them and they want to kind of like use them to further their means, but they don't care about them. They don't care about the individual.
Yeah. Okay.
Like,
So I don't know if you heard when I opened this, but I did acknowledge that um
hmm,
I did acknowledge that there's well, I actually mentioned when I started this when I started doing this kind of work where I was doing the Honey Badger show. I think I started doing this in 2012, and um in the beginning that was my one of my primary arguments against the conservative view was that they weren't really valuing men because they were so accustomed. So this is the thing. It's like you get
hmm,
used to, like all of the work that men do to keep society running. You get used to them being there, like essentially being the backbone of whatever your country is, and that is how it's easy to take them for granted because we have to like remind ourselves, of like, and not just when, let's say, because one of the things that conservatives do, I guess, is that they do acknowledge men when they are asked to, like go to war, for example. Um, but and then of course they get like, uh, a lot of respect if they come back alive, and a lot of like fanfare and mourning if they don't, and that's fine because like that again, this is like a common MRA argument, which is like, we only seem to acknowledge men if they die for us, and it's like, well, we should probably be doing this while they're alive, and I agree with that, and I've been saying that, and because the thing is that when I say that I'm giving credit to conservatives, not all of them, but is a growing number that are acknowledging, the not just like men's issues, but the importance of men as a part of our society, and not only because of their use. It's more so because what men do, they do because they choose to. So, if a man works in a I don't know, in a coal mine or on an oil rig or in some other really hard job, obviously they're there because, they want to do that job, even if it's backbreaking work. And one of the reasons, although there are more, that they're doing it is because they want to do this work to make life better for everyone else that benefits from it, while also obviously doing for their family, you know. And that is, I'm not saying that we should be having parades, but I do think that there should be more acknowledgement of the work that men do that we often take for granted. Um, and I do think that conservatives have forgotten that. And I think it's because, again, they were, accustomed to everything. And then when things started to look like they could break down, even though those men aren't responsible, they realized or at least some are realizing the importance of men. And not just because, again, of like what they can do, but because our country and like the West and the world needs men. Like they need men more than anything else. They're like, we could have like, endless fields of coal and oil and energy, diamonds. We can have all that. But if there's no men, then it doesn't matter because we can't get it out. So
we're not like Star Trek. We haven't reached a post-scarcity society yet.
Yeah, we haven't. So that means we do need men. And I think that if men are asked, like, would you rather just walk away from everything and let everything go to hell, or would you rather, like try to make the world better by, being productive? I think that men generally want to be productive. And so if they're going to do it anyway, we should at least honor that. So, and I think that, let me just read your question again. Yeah, so their ability to maintain the status quo. So that's another thing too, is that there's really no status quo. Like it's blown up, it's gone. Like everything is up in the air right now. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that women have displaced men, and not just like as a people, as half the population, but they have almost completely destroyed their identity as men. And so a conservative who's still talking about a kind of status quo is obviously delusional. Like we don't have it. Like we don't. And the only way to get it back is that we have to go to men and we have to like, help them, like find their way, give them their identity back, give them their purpose back. That's what men want. That's why these young boys are, 12 years old and they're watching Andrew Tate videos, because they're trying to like get their identity. Like if you take away a man's identity as a man, you're going to create a dysfunctional, destructive, and violent person. And they know this. They know this because this is what they want. They want war. They want chaos. And so I think that there's plenty of conservatives that think this. But I think that like that's okay because we can just correct them. And, they'll either wake up to the truth or they won't. But some are. And I think that is a good thing. I think that, it could be too late. I don't know. I'm just like, I don't really see the point in being nihilistic about that, because if it is too late, then why am I doing a show? What's the point of any of this, right? So
what's the point of getting out of the bed in the morning?
Yeah, but I could just go get another job. Like I can just go back to teaching. I could just work at a grocery store or something, and I would make more money. I would be able to support my family, and I'd be able to like get benefits like insurance and whatnot. But I'm doing this because I think this matters. And so, even though I'm not getting paid as much, I'm barely getting by, and but I don't care about that because I care about this message. And this is the reason why, not only because, I don't want to be a pessimist, but because I am optimistic. I think that there are people like at least in the online space, I guess, that are talking more and more and more about men's issues, which means they're going to make more people aware of it, which means someone really significant might take notice. Notice here's another example. I don't know if you guys have anybody in Ireland that's based. I assume no, but I don't blame you guys for it.
We got a socialist feminist party.
Why are they
Rosa, they're called.
why are they repeating themselves? Just call them the feminist party. But
No, they insist on it.
oh, of course, yeah. But like in oh shit, I was gonna mention something that was yeah. So this is a first, and I mentioned this before. There's a politician, a Republican guy named Josh Hawley, and he did a speech, and it was at like, I don't know, like a CPAC or something. I don't know. It was some conservative like gathering or event, right? And he did a speech, and the whole thing was about men and men's issues. And there was no like, demanding that men step up garbage. It was basically just talking about that we have to help men, that we have to make them a priority, and here are all of their problems. And this guy, and this is the reason why I was shocked by this, no politician has ever done that, number one. And the closest thing to it might have been like Philip Davies, who even then, like if you asked him, he's kind of an egalitarian, which is fine, right? I don't care. Like I like Philip Davies. I know that he's a well-meaning chap, and I know that he knows about men's issues. So he's probably just playing the game so that he can keep his job and continue to do good. But like, not since a guy like that have I seen, and I've never seen an American politician do this, a politician talk about men's issues as openly and as frankly as Josh Hawley did. So can I give him credit for that? Can I say, you did good? Or I can't because he's a Republican. And I'm not saying anything to you because, I'm just saying in general, because I think that we do have, it seems to me that we do have this like knee-jerk reaction to against like giving credit where credit is due, and in particular when it comes to people on the right. And I'm trying to understand what's actually happening, because like there's no way that like Nancy Pelosi is going to say something like that. There's no way that AOC is ever going to say something like this. In fact, the only time that she talks about men in like an interview is when she tells men that they need to like step up and be allies to women, and that they need to like address their toxic masculinity because it's like what makes them violent, and all the usual feminist garbage. So if I hear a man that doesn't do that, and he talks in front of like basically the world, because anyone could watch that video and see that speech, and he just says we have to help men, and he talks about all the problems, like upbringing, etc., then I'm like, I think he deserves props for that. Maybe he watched the Red Pill. I don't know. Like, like that, as long as Cassie J's movie's out there, I think more and more people are watching it, and I think that it's waking people up. And when you couple that with these online conversations, and I'm always hearing talking points or arguments that we have made on this channel coming up in the most unexpected of places, like Chris Williamson, like you guys don't know who he is. He has that YouTube channel Modern Wisdom, I think. Like Peterson, who is like the guy that was confronted the most, but like I can tell his talking points come from Karen, and I think he's even like admitted to watching her videos. So maybe it's not Karen, maybe that would be ideal, but like, does it matter as long as the talking points are out there, as long as the ideas are being shared? So
like, I mean, getting these talking points out, you definitely are pushing the culture in a direction which would be beneficial for like the lives of men. And I don't mean about the economy. I'm talking about the lives of men, not just them as a vast produce income and resources.
Yeah,
like,
sure.
If then that's great. But from what I see a lot from the right is they're kind of like putting out these fishlers. Like they'll say stuff about, we need to protect men's mental health and we need to ensure this and that with the divorce court. And then when they reel you in, then it comes out, oh yeah, you have to be a provider now to someone who can just decimate you in the divorce court.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm glad you pointed out the economic argument. that I do think that sometimes the right gets too focused on that because they're and I'm all for free markets and all that too.
Yes.
But the problem is that we can't address that until we address the culture. I think the culture has to change, and that changes
Yeah.
what we how we treat men and what we're willing to put up with. And also, again, I am look. So let me just point something else out. Another area. So I've been talking about conservative commentators talking about men's issues, and I think it's great because they tend to reach the most people. And I mean, like Tucker Carlson did a whole thing on Fox News about men, like a few years ago, and like the left lost their minds. Like they couldn't take it. He even had Warren Farrell on, and Warren Farrell's one of the most like mistreated people on the internet that's associated with men's issues because the guy is like a fucking harmless little guy, right? But they don't care, right? This is like the hostility that we're up against. And they've called him a pedophile and all kinds of shit, right? But the other thing I'm also noticing is that people with a tremendous amount of cultural influence are also talking about men's issues. And I think that that is at least as important as people who discuss, let's say, the political, So, for example, there are a lot of people, well, I don't know how big they are, but I do think that they get a lot of traffic. So there are like YouTubers that talk about like nerdy interests, right? Like movies, TV, games, things like this, right? And they used to just do that. Like they used to just be like, oh, here's the new comic book I got and let's go through it, right? It was basically a specific kind of market for nerds that was like talking about Star Trek and Doctor Who and, like these nerdy things. And then because the feminists, they can't leave anything alone, they started to alter those interests. They started to like they got involved in Star Wars. They got involved in Doctor Who. They got involved in Star Trek. They got involved in, Marvel Comics and the MCU and everything else. And these people were getting really frustrated because they saw the quality, was in the toilet and everything was feminism and everything was anti-male and everything was, changing to like fit this new way of framing reality and rewriting history. And they were getting really upset about it. And then what did they do? Well, they were like, well, I want to learn more about feminism. I want to find out why this is happening. And they go online and they find anti-feminist content. They find Janice Fiamengo. They find Karen. And it wakes them up. And they're like, oh, this whole thing is nothing but a gigantic gaslight that's happening through the culture to get everyone to side with them. And they're literally using the fandoms against the fans because they're saying this is where the fandom is now. And if you're a real fan, you'd support this. But like, obviously they don't because it doesn't, it's lost the soul of whatever it originally was. Right. And this is all part of the engineering. So what do? They make content that criticizes whatever their interest is, and then they also take it a step further and they say this is where it's coming from, and then they tell their audience it's coming from these ideologies. It's like leftist, progressive, communist, Marxist, feminist, whatever. And then those people, they go on and they see it everywhere, and you can see that the culture is being like changed it's moving towards let's say a culture of skepticism towards whatever the establishment is putting out. So like this new like rings of power, like everyone is rejecting it. Like no one is even watching it. They're just saying this is trash. This has nothing to do with Tolkien. And the buck stops here. And then, with other things, it probably got too far, where it, like with Star Trek, Doctor Who, Star Wars, like there wasn't much that could be done, but it's okay because people have all walked away, or at least a lot of them have. And it doesn't have, and that's because they learned, why it exists, where it comes from. And this is like the most powerful thing regarding the way that like, progressives, feminists, whatever, control the culture, because it relies on the idea that consumers are so stupid that they'll just take whatever they're given and they won't like ever ask themselves if this is right or not. And apparently some people, you know, do still do that. They're just consumers and they're just gonna, you know, consume whatever's in front of them. But a lot are going to say, no, this isn't right. This is wrong. And I think that maybe it's these kinds of conversations which start off with, you know, someone like Karen putting out a handful of videos where she goes into the history of feminism, where she goes into what it really is, when she goes into like the evolutionary evidence against feminism, you know, by talking about bonobos and chimpanzees and other primates. So it's not even like coming from a religious place. Like that's the thing about Karen. You can't accuse her of like being, you know, like some kind of like traditional conservative Christian type, because she's not. And so like, you know, you see that you don't have any of these other things that might influence your opinion on that. And it all leads to where we are now. And, you know, they can't stand that. So those are, you know, those are my thoughts on all that.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah, like especially the part where you're talking about like the whole like what's happened with nerd culture, how it got invaded, and now it's just turning bland and it's all the same, and it's not even anything that's entertaining anymore.
Yeah, and you know, I'll say this too: the reason why nerd culture was popular is that it was essentially created by men that had a sense of their childhood that they kept with them, and the wonder and imagination that comes with that. That's literally where science fiction and fantasy comes from. It comes from men that are in touch with their child side, like their childhood, which is based in this desire to, like, you know, engage their imagination and their sense of wonder. And that was like the whole thing. But like the people who do this now, they don't have any of that. They're basically mostly women. And I mean, like I watched a interview. Have you seen this? Is there another question coming? Let me know if there is. If not, that's okay. I watched this interview. I forget the guy's name, but he's like a comedian, and he was on trigonometry. Now, normally, I'm not a really big fan of trigonometry. I think they're trying to milquetoast, and they're always trying to find the center of everything, and it really bugs me when people do that. But whatever, it's fine, right? Like, I just believe sometimes there is just like right and wrong. You know, in many cases, you can find a middle ground, fine, but sometimes there isn't. And but they were interviewing this guy. This is a good example of what I don't think there should be a middle ground on. This guy was a stand-up comedian. He had done sketches. I guess he was gonna like potentially get a job on Saturday Night Live. Okay, and what he kept running into were managers and people that were telling him they're not looking for white men right now, and so he can't get a job. And that, at another point, he even had a manager call up and said, "We love you. We want to use you for something. We like, you know, we think you're a star, like that you're going to be big or whatever." And then they called him back. They were like, "You know what? We're not looking for white guys right now." And he was like, "Really?" And they were like, "Yeah." And he asked them, "Is this a company policy?" And they were like, "Yeah, it's a company policy." And like, this is the thing. Like, I bring that up because I bet that guy is really funny. But because of the absolute state of our entertainment system or entertainment industry or whatever you want to call it, like, the best qualified people are not getting the job. And this is why, and this is, again, another thing. I think it's not just for the Marvel studios, but also for a number of other studios. Like, they're literally just hiring female directors and female writers and female, like, you know, just like women. Why? So they can say
High
that
Guardian Spice.
Yeah, so and the reason is just so that they can say, well, we have an all-female crew. But like, they suck. Like, they suck at their job. And it's not because they're women, it's because they suck. And so like, the quality of everything is really low because the quality of the employees are low. They were selected for diversity reasons. The the quality of writing is low, and I mean it's really low. Like TV writing and film writing has never been as good as, say, literary writing, but it was at least able to do something coherent in most cases so that people could enjoy the ride, even if it's just like an average movie. But like it's nothing like that now. Like the dialogue is terrible, acting is terrible, everything is terrible. It's so bad that even if something has decent special effects, you're so distracted by how awful everything else is, it doesn't really matter, And a lot of times the effects are bad too. So they're literally cramming unqualified people into positions because of ideology, because of feminism, and that's it. And no one involved cares if the product is any good. They only care that women made it. Which
like the Ghostbusters 2016 as well.
Yeah, but that was directed by a man, so like they can dismiss that, right? But no, these are, and again, what is that going to do except make everyone else look at that and say women probably shouldn't direct? Like that's I think that because they're terrible at it. So but no, I mean I think ultimately it's about the culture, and they don't care if it succeeds, then that's great. But if it fails and collapses everything, that's also great, because then they can just rebuild from nothing. That's like their whole thing. Like destroy everything and then we'll rebuild it in our image. So it doesn't really matter how it goes. But I'm getting way off target here. So I'm just saying, like, okay, to come back to your question or your statement about conservatives, firstly, I don't think it's limited to conservatives, but this is what I wanted to bring up because I think that it's okay to give them credit for, helping us spread the message about men. But I think that it's true that the economic argument is, there's a lot of logical reasons to support it, but it's not moving people, right? I think that like it's the culture that will alter things. Like a man and a woman that are in love, madly in love, but really poor, they will do the best they can with what they have. But that's because they have each other, and they think that their commitment to each other is more important than whatever it is that they have. And generally, they believe that if they work together and they work as a team, they could make their lives better. But like that will to do those things doesn't come from like the state of the economy. It comes from the people, and not just those two, but like the people around them, their family members, their friends, their community. And I think that that's the thing that needs to be built on. And what I think that comes from is it comes from narrative. It's why we're so addicted to stories, because like it's why the Bible is a series of stories, right? It's like the narrative or stories are the thing that motivates people. It informs them. It works better than like some like stat sheet, that shows, what the various, resources and their value are in different parts of the country. Like the people don't respond to that. They want to hear stories because we have like this craving for the aesthetic. And I think that is one of the things that we should start working on. And I think that in a way we are. I mean, like Daily Wire, they put out a movie called what was that movie with Gina Carano? It was in the West. I forget the name of it.
It's not Run, Hide, Fight, is it?
It's no. That's about a school shooting, right? No, I've never seen that one. But I did watch Terror on the Prairie, and that's the one with Gina Carano. And I mean, it was okay, but like I think it's a start. I'll put it that way. There were things about it that I didn't like, the way it was shot and stuff. But the point is they're doing something. And then there's like another movie coming out called My Son Hunter, which somebody mentioned in the chat. That's not being put out by Daily Wire, though. That's being put out by, I forget the other one, like one of the other conservative sites. And it's directed by this guy.
Oh, The Blaze?
Maybe. I don't know if it's the, I think it might be The Blaze, but I'm not sure. And it's about, Hunter Biden. And when I saw the trailer for that, I was kind of cringing because I'm like, I get that this is like politically relevant, but what is it like? I want something that's going to tell us something about the human condition. I want something that's going to like inspire men, like when we were going through all these problems we were experiencing in the 1970s, because a lot of people say we're living in the 70s again, which is basically like late Carter and before Reagan, and like all of these, we had a bunch of similar problems, like economic problems, inflation problems, war. There were all these things that were going on. But like what was being released in theaters? So there were some films that were kind of pessimistic about the future, like The Warriors, for example. But there were also like The Warriors, kind of a cult classic, right? So people liked it, but The Thing, that wasn't really a big hit. But then there were films that were aspirational, that like made people feel like, okay, things are tough right now, but I can make it. And there was like this spirit of resilience or perseverance, or resolve that was being sort of shared with people by people creating this content because they wanted to inspire people, right? And I would say Americans, but I don't think that it was limited to that. I think the feeling, the general mood of the 70s was probably the same in all over the West. And so like we got Richard Donner's Superman, which could not have come at a more appropriate time because it's something that we needed. We also got the original Rocky, and we got Star Wars. So these are all like very optimistic, pro-male, sort of, hero's journey, like classic stories that are sort of repackaged for the current period. And they were filled with a lot of wonder and imagination and so on. And it was exactly what we needed at that time. And so what we need is something like that. We need it now. We need it yesterday, because all of those ones that I mentioned that have become like household names or franchises, well, they're all owned by the woke, so they're not going to do anything with it. So we need like new ideas, new better ideas, and we need to like support people who want to essentially create that. But that requires, again, that spirit of the man with the child inside. I mean, that was what Tolkien was, right?
It's in every artist.
Yeah, well, any good artist, yes.
Propaganda artists, not so much.
Yeah. And I mean, like, there's plenty of old movies we can go back and watch. I saw somebody in the chat, Karn33333 says we need to rewatch Secondhand Lions. That is a great movie. It actually makes me cry sometimes. But yeah, like that's a good example. So I guess going back to what I was saying, I think the culture really matters, and this is like the one thing I would, if I'm able, I will tell, especially these larger kind of conservative, or what would you call them, websites, companies that are trying to make content. I would ask that they look at the sort of, I don't know, like they would look at they need a guy who has the inner child. That's what they need. That's the kind of visionary they need. And
yeah, but you're looking at another problem. Like, I specialize in the arts. Like, like as I was growing up, and like there was no conservative voice supporting people going into the arts. The conservative voice is people going to STEM.
Yeah, so I mean, maybe I could talk about this on another show because I'm running out of time here. But
yeah, I understand.
Yeah, but I will say though, I think that the notion that arts were all liberal, I don't think it's true.
It's yeah.
I think that most of it was conservative insofar as it was really concerned with beauty, and that beauty, people will tell you, oh, it's in the eye of the beholder. No, there is such a thing as an objectively beautiful thing, and that whole notion that it just depends on how you look at it, man. I think that's made up, and I think that this notion is actually really old. It goes back to basically the birth of postmodernism in a lot of ways. And that before that, and this is with the visual art. So I've done some art history. So
I specialize in that.
Yeah, so this goes back to like, the existentialists and the postmodernists and Marcel Duchamp, who I think did something that he didn't realize what the consequences of doing that would be. And what it created was a divide in the artistic community between people who think that beautiful art is art for its own sake, and and that it should to some degree reflect reality, not necessarily life. It doesn't need to be realistic, but it should reflect something true about the human condition in an aesthetic way. And then on the other side of that, there's a camp that says, no, all art must make a statement. That statement must be political, and that political statement must be our political statement. And those people took over the art elite, part of society, the elites within artistic society. So gallery owners, curators, art dealers,
the colleges,
academics, and basically just like elite collectors, right? And so it was an elitist thing from the get-go, and it was all about the political. And artists change their style just so they can sell art to these people. Or maybe they were experimenting, or they wanted to say something political and they wanted it to get attention, and like Picasso's Guernica, for example. And I think that they gave it to him because it's a trade-off, right? And this is the reason why I believe that most artists of the time that would have been considered artists, but because their art was a little bit more like based on a subject, or it was telling a story, or it was something out of the Bible or whatever, they would get dismissed as illustrators. And so they created a whole new class of artists called illustrator, which is someone who is beneath the artist. So if you're Frank Frazetta and you do a painting, of like the Death Adder or Conan,
Death
Eater, yeah, or Conan, like on a horse or something, or fighting monsters in like a fantasy painting with a nude woman and snakes or whatever it is,
where Caravaggio's taking a Christ.
They will say, well, that's not art. Because it's not speaking about like, the suffering working class people. It's not saying something like that. It's just beautiful, which is all he wanted to do. He wanted to like bring people into another world with his work. Another one is Norman Rockwell, who was an amazing artist, like amazing. And his paintings were so good because they looked real and yet cartoony at the same time. And it was all Americana stuff. It was like paintings of, sailors getting tattoos of their ex-girlfriends, or it was cute and funny. But because his work had such mass appeal to like, anybody, there was nothing elite about it. So they would dismiss it, not just as, oh, well, you're just making art for the common person, but also it's pro-America. Like, so and we don't like that, even though it wasn't like cringy patriotic, but like, you might see Rosie the Riveter with a flag, or you might see like a woman walking around town, in New York with a big fur coat and a little tiny dog. And everybody's supposed to find that funny because of the contrast. But again, Norman Rockwell was not the right kind of artist. So he was essentially not considered an artist. And this has been for a very long time, and that elitism has essentially, like, it's everywhere now. So, you know, if you write a book and you think your book is fun, but like the critics who tend to be woke, if they don't like your book because they don't like something about you, well, then your book is bad now, right? So it's the same things. Like, you're not making a book about the thing that I think you should be making a book about, therefore I don't like your book. Who was the guy who there was an author, I don't remember the name of the book he wrote, where it was like a science fiction thing, and everyone was sure it was going to be a huge hit. Like they made a movie about it. It was like Harrison Ford was in it, and there was like this the main character was this young boy. I can't remember the name of the story. I'm sorry, but I'm sure someone in the chat knows what I'm talking about. And it turned out, like, the writer of this book, I think he was like religious, or he was maybe he said something about gay marriage or whatever. And immediately everyone was like, he's a homophobe, he wants to kill gay people, don't buy his book, and like no one talks about him anymore. He's just gone now, right? And so again, like, if you had pressed Tolkien on that when he was alive, and you were like, what do you think about gay people? Like, what could he possibly say that would have prevented him from being canceled if he was asked this more recently? And then, you know, like, it's just like, obviously there's a condition that's been built in our culture that has become a lot less tolerant than it was. And so, like, it's a good thing that we got Lord of the Rings when we did, because, like, if he had lived a few decades later, you know, I don't think that would have I don't think we would have heard of that. I can't remember the name of that book though. Anyway,
there's no space in our culture for the iconoclasts anymore.
Yeah. Anyway, do I have any more callers? All right, well, I guess I'm just gonna end the show because there's nobody else. So, if any of you guys remember the story I'm thinking about, put a comment in. I'm gonna move you. Oh, do you have any final thoughts before I put you in the other thing?
Yeah, just like from my experiences, like, I'm always kind of like having these reactions towards like conservatives who are like claiming to be speaking about men's issues, because it's more so I'm always afraid that they're just kind of going to use me to further their goals rather than just help me. Like,
what do you think? What do you think their goals are? Like, could there be a chance that their goals and your goals are, like, they overlap?
I want to kind of like the liberation for men. Like, you don't want them to be shackled to like being a permanent like money maker or a permanent producer or something. Like,
Yeah.
you know, I want the freedom to choose their own path.
Yeah.
The tradcons don't like that.
Yeah, I mean, there's expectations that they put on men, but then at the end of the day, unless they're gonna, like, make it a law, they can't really make men do anything they don't want to do. And if they do start to say, well, we should make it a law, then I will be right next to you fighting against that. But
no, they wouldn't make it a law. What they would do is they would come into a common space. They would kind of take, and then they would start policing that space.
Yeah,
like kind of what the left currently do.
Yeah, that's possible. But again, like, I don't, if men can rebel against the left and the women that occupy it, I don't think they'll have a problem rebelling against men trying to do the same. Or even like conservative women who try to do that. But what I would suspect is if conservatives think that men should be behaving a certain way, like they think is best for society, then they should probably be thinking about ways to incentivize it instead of force it, because I don't think you can force it. And I think it's only going to make men, more suspicious of you. But if instead you basically say, you you look at the incentives for doing it, and then maybe you're not going to get every man to do it, but you'll probably get most men who were going to sort of fall in line with that anyway, because again, like, I don't know what the alternative, like, you either have your life and there's no women in it and there's no family and there's no children, so you're just like a bachelor, and you're not hurting anyone and you're making your money and you're satisfied. I don't see a problem with that. Or you will get married and you will like start a family and you'll do all those things, and I don't see a problem with that either. But I do believe that more men are more likely to do the latter, so we may as well just get out of their way. And I guess that's my ultimate like belief on that. So, oh, and as far as the book, I remember it now. It's called Ender's Game. And
I remember that, man. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was very popular. I knew a girl who was big on reading, and she just would not stop gushing about how great Ender's Game is. And then she learned about his supposed homophobia, which I never looked into because, I mean, like, saying someone is a homophobe, I might just learn they were Catholic, and they never even said anything about gay relations. It's like Chris Pratt. Chris Pratt gets accused of being a homophobe, and then when people say, "Well, where'd you get that from?" He's good. They're going to be like, "Well, he's a Christian," and that's like the end of it. And I'm like, but that doesn't prove anything. Like, but yeah, that, and then they're, "Oh, we should cancel him." Don't watch Guardians of the Galaxy anymore. So yeah, it's Ender's Game. That's the one I'm thinking. I never read it.
Yeah, it says it bombed at the box office.
Yeah, because it got a bunch of really bad PR. I guess it also I guess it also wasn't a great movie interpretation, but like, I think that it was a very popular book, and then people like learned about this guy being a bigot, and all of a sudden everybody like he has the cheese touch. Everybody wants to move away from him. But like, again, maybe it is a good story. Maybe it deserves a good adaptation. Maybe like The Blaze or something should look into it. Like, this is, I think that what people want is something that sparks the imagination, and nothing in the mainstream right now does that. It's all garbage. So anyway, if you guys like have, speaking of which, let me ask you guys this in the audience. Of those of you who are readers that like read books, maybe you're really into reading fantasy or science fiction. Is there a book that you think would make for a fantastic adaptation, and you've always wondered if, like, why hasn't anyone done it yet? Why hasn't anyone made one yet? But I'd be curious. So if there's like a story that you've always like loved that you read, and you're like, why hasn't someone made this into a movie yet? Tell us in the comments. I'd like to see that. So, Knight's Motorcycling says he's not a homophobe, but he is a simp. He heard Dallas Howard saying she was paid less and fought to get her more money. Money she didn't earn. Now all women will be entitled to such. Well, no one ever said that, this isn't just something that men do. So, especially, you said it was for Dallas Howard? Yeah, she's got simps. All right, anyway, Bing Bling Boy, I'm going to move you back into the screening room. Thanks for coming on. And,
thank you for having me on.
Yeah, and I'll talk to you all later. All right, I'm going to stop taking questions, so let me just put this in there. Thank you, guys. Thank you to the screeners. Thank you, Darth Sonic 413 and Swashberry. You guys are lifesavers. I can't do this show without you. And thank you guys for coming on. Hacksaw Ridge was a rewarding watch, better than Captain America. Well, I like them both for different reasons, but Hacksaw Ridge is a very good movie. I saw it on unfortunately, I watched it on the plane. I think I was flying either to or back from the UK, and I saw it on the plane, which means I saw like a really, really edited version. Because I mean, I know Mel Gibson, man. Isn't that a Mel Gibson movie? I'm fairly certain it is. And Mel Gibson movies can be really gory. He doesn't give a fuck about that. So, The Queen's Thief. What's that? I don't even know what that is. That sounds kind of interesting though. Dragons of Pern. No one did a decent Fahrenheit 451 movie. There was a movie, but it wasn't very good. I mean, maybe. I don't know. That's actually kind of interesting. I wouldn't want like another remake of say 1984. I really liked Animal Farm. There was like an animated Animal Farm. I watched it in school. Fucking ruined me when the when the horse died. So Dragon's Pern is a book series that I'd like to see as a TV show. All right. Derek G, do most leftists believe in a creator but not a specific religion? I'm genuinely curious. No, I think they're mostly like secular atheists. I think that if there are some that are not, then they are the kind that might say they're spiritual but not religious. But I think in general, and I don't know why there would be like a God-fearing Christian progressive, but they do exist. I think that they think that the religion aspect of it is separate from, they try to live like those things are separate things, but I think there is a connection in atheism and leftism. It's a novel series by Megan Whalen Turner. That was Catherine Scully, The Queen's Thief. That sounds like some period romance. But you know what? I don't know if it is. It probably isn't. But I will say that if it is, even that would be okay. Because I've noticed that, like, have you noticed that movies for women are becoming rare too? Like, movies that feature women tend to be feminist movies. So they're about, women being like boss women, and they're like fighting men, and they're not a princess, and they're not waiting to be rescued, and that stuff, right? So that they're very like they're in a lot of ways they're anti-romance, they're anti-love, they're they're not even pro-woman, because the woman in their stories are not, they tend to be like symbolic. They don't exist as people. And I think that women are actually like craving, like a good like female romance story. Maybe like, I don't know, was like what's the Pride and Prejudice, which by the way is an anti-feminist story. According to Janice Fiamengo, who did a really great video on Pride and Prejudice and a couple of other old novels, because she was really into literature and extremely well educated on all that stuff, and she made a couple of great videos about various works of the time, and we actually had her on the show to talk about another really well-known romance novel called The Bostonians, and because I watched the movie and I didn't think I was gonna like it. Like, it looked like, oh, it's one of these stodgy, like everybody's wearing, bustles, and the men are all in suits. But then I watched it and I was like, oh, this is actually, there's a lot going on here. It's better than I thought. So yeah, check out Janice's YouTube channel. She does a lot of really great videos. Mostly she goes into the history of feminism, like, going back to sort of prove that it was never about equality, it was never about women, and it was always about power. But she's also, because she's a big reader, she's also made some books about stories that she thinks that she can demonstrate to be anti-feminist, and that it shows there were a lot of women against the feminist movement, or even the proto-feminist movement. So let's see. Duncan Alexander says, I'm reading Hoarding in Hell. It's a Korean web novel. It would be a good movie, I think. Okay. Chris Hoff says, there was a Richard Corbin comic in a heavy metal mag that would make a great short film, An Angel Shy of Hell. That's super cool. JLM says, I remember the Dragon Riders of Pern series, did not read it. Night Motorcycling says, they're doing a remake of Working Girl. Chris Hoff says they should do a remake of Trauma's War. I don't think trauma films can be made these days. They can. I think aren't they redoing like Toxic Waste Avenger? But I think that Trauma has to stay under the radar, and which is what they've always done, because they've always been like really low budget, So it's almost like, well, you can hate the movie if you want, but we're still gonna make money. Anything but Richard Bach could be quite good. Is a Richard Bach a writer? So do you mean like anything by Richard Bach? JLM says, anyway, I'll drop a like. Thank you for the like. It means a lot. Duncan Alexander says, stoner movies seem to have become more prolific. Well, I don't know if they're still popular, but they were for a while. And the problem with that is, like, I like a funny stoner movie, but like that whole like Judd Apatow, Seth Rogen, like that whole period, Jonah Hill, they were all basically looking the same. Like it was like they just wanted to keep doing stoner shit, and it got old. Like if it's like once in a while, like my favorite stoner movie is probably, it doesn't even have anything to do with them. It was Half Baked with Dave Chappelle and what's his name? Brewer. And Jim Brewer and Dave Chappelle. And there were a few other people, like Stephen Wright makes a cameo in it. And I mean, I thought it was funny because, for one, obviously, they were good at doing pot humor, but also the characters had an arc. And it wasn't like forced or corny, and so I enjoyed it. See, I'm not a big fan of Jay and Silent Bob. I think they're a little like, I don't know. I think there's something artificial about it. Like they have like nicknames and costumes, and it doesn't really like. I like it when things seem a little bit more like real. I've known stoners; they're not like that. That's kind of what it is, right? And I don't know. Like it's like Kevin Smith knows people will just find them cool because they're stoners, and it's I don't. It doesn't ring as genuine to me. I mean, I could watch that movie, I guess, but it's not like, I don't know. Like I liked some movies are not stoner movies, but they have like stoner moments in them. So I liked The 40-Year-Old Virgin because it has some genuinely hilarious parts. But now that I've watched it and enough time has passed and I look back on it, I think The 40-Year-Old Virgin, like many of Judd Apatow's movies, are all like male feminist cuckery movies. So, and I don't think that they're very like, I don't know. There's something about them that it feels anti-male. And like a really good example is, what's the other movie I'm thinking about? Knocked Up. Holy shit. What a cucked movie that is. Like seriously. Did you guys ever see Knocked Up? It is so bad. Like, it's terrible. And essentially the plot is Seth Rogen, because of course he's in it, he goes to a bar, he meets a woman there, they have a one-night stand, she gets pregnant, and decides she's gonna keep it, even though he didn't want a baby. They kind of like stumble through their sexual encounter, so it's not even good for her. It's one of those things, right? But she gets pregnant, and essentially the whole movie after that becomes about how he has to become a man so that he can father this child. And this is not coming from like a conservative creator. This is Judd Apatow. He's like a male feminist, right? So that's the plot. And then the guy, by the end, I think he sort of proves that he's worthy of being a father. And she gives him the green light to be the father. They have like a bunch of close calls in terms of their relationship. And yeah, it's just like it was the worst. Derek G says, I saw it back when I was totally blue pilled. Yes. She also hated This Is 40, the sequel. I've never seen this. Even my wife hated Knocked Up. Yeah. Paul Grofton says, Open All Night, American version, season 1, episode 4, where Kevin Smith ripped off all his materials. Really? I'll have to look that up. Makes me want to rewatch The Black Cauldron. I haven't seen that movie in so long. But I think it was, I don't know, I don't remember. I think I liked it though. But as a kid though, I was just like, I just wanted to see fantasy and science fiction things. So if there's a skeleton in the movie and he's like talking, I want to see that. Simon Pegg usually has a pretty good story arc about the slacker who becomes an achiever. Yeah, but I guess the motivation behind it is what matters. You know, like a guy who is a slacker but is ultimately unsatisfied with his life, but doesn't, maybe he just lacks the motivation or the drive to like change his life, and then something happens that sort of like, you know, twist of fate forces his hand, he has to like do something, and then he feels he comes out better for it at the end, completely changed. I'm all for that. But I think a lot of times it's women is the primary motivation, and I don't know that I don't think that's all right. Anyway, I gotta close it out. Thanks guys for coming on the show. Thank you for your comments. I appreciate it. Let me know what you guys think about what we discussed on the show. And yeah, I look forward to seeing your comments. So if you guys like this video, please hit like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed, hit the bell for notifications, leave us a comment, let us know what you guys think about what we talked about today. And most importantly, please share this video because sharing is caring. Thank you guys so much for coming on today's episode of Brian's Badger Lodge. Have a great weekend, and we will talk to you all in the next video.
Men's rights activists are machines, dude. Okay? They are literal machines. They are talking point machines. They are impossible to fucking deal with, especially if you have like a couple dudes who have good memory on top of that too. Holy shit, you're fucked.